Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, today we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. Now, I have two maps displayed in front of you. The first map is the deep state map. The deep state map indicates that there is still fighting ongoing for the fortified town of Volodar, also known as Ugledar in Russian circles. So for you English speakers, essentially the town means coal gift. So if you're driving through Kansas or Utah and you get to a town and that's it, coal gift. It's the town of coal gift. Now, if I'm wrong on that, I'm sure someone will correct me. But again, English speakers, the fortified town of coal gift. All right, so onward we go. Now, this is the deep state map. Let's jump over to another map. And this map is a little bit different. And you can see here, the town is completely under the control of Russian forces. It seems like, as we speak, that the Russians have taken control of the town. The real heavy fighting took place over the last 4 or 5 days or so, as Russian infantry units and Spetsnaz infiltrated the town, and then finally the coup de grace was the encirclement and preventing Ukrainian soldiers from escaping this locale. Now, we don't know how many Ukrainian prisoners has been taken. The Ukrainians are mum about this. And additionally, here in the United States, no information. No information. The only information that I have seen here in the United States was the following, put out by, I believe it was the Miami Herald. And the Miami Herald reported that a Ukrainian outpost was taken. Ukrainians suffer setback as outpost is taken. Now, is Volodar an outpost? Is Coal Gift an outpost? Probably not. A little more significant than a quote-unquote outpost. This is a fortified redoubt that was used by the Ukrainian military, and it has fallen. Now, obviously, a lot of news right now is following what is supposedly an attack by Iran that could come within the next several hours against the Israelis. Now, we're going to follow that. We're going to talk about that. But again, we want to cover this conflict. At the end of the day, this conflict is most likely a conflict that is going to spread and probably involve the United States in some capacity. Okay? Now, there was a very disconcerting bit of information that came out of the office of the president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, let's ask this question: is this a reasonable statement to make? Okay, is this a reasonable statement in the nuclear realm? In the nuclear realm, if we were to go back to the 1970s and we were to hear a foreign leader say the following, directed towards the leader of the in this case the Russian Federation, that leader is quote unquote too afraid to launch nuclear weapons. He's too afraid to launch nuclear weapons. Now let that sink in for a minute. And is that an appropriate level of conversation to have when the United States, the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, France, have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed towards each other? And if there was a rapid escalation of armed conflict, which would lead to a nuclear exchange, that quite possibly could end humanity, or at best, put humanity into a dark age, a dark age beyond dark ages. The families and children, 3 generations into the future, would have a quality of life that would be far, far, far below the current quality of life. It would essentially, after a major nuclear exchange, the quality of life would be on par with the 1000 or the 1100 medieval serf. It's probably the way things would look, for a period of time at least. So again, you have Zelensky saying, well, you know what, he's just too afraid to use nuclear weapons. Well, at the same time, the Russians are changing law on how nuclear weapons are deployed. Okay? At the same time, you have those statements happening in regards to Zelensky. You have other statements that are coming out. For instance, from NATO. NATO is saying, or the new head of NATO is saying that new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. So think about that for a second. You got this Secretary of General of NATO declaring that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. Now, on the other side of the fence, you've got the leadership in the Kremlin saying, not possible. That's our red line. The Ukraine will never be part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now look, I go back to the 1970s, I go back to the 1980s, the 1990s, and we develop a time machine, and we send someone back in a time machine, and on the eve of the Russian coup d'etat, where essentially the KGB for a short period took control of Mikhail Gorbachev and took power for a brief period of time. If you were able to go back to that time and say, hey, look, this is what 2024 is going to look like, you are going to see the entirety of the Ukraine be absorbed into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And you have all these power makers in a room, and you simply say, thoughts, opinions. Yeah, I'm thinking that Boris Yeltsin does not rise to power. I'm thinking that the Soviet Union finds a way to continue. Now look, I get it. We don't have a time machine and we can't do that. But if you can compare and contrast, and you think about this a little bit, and you think about how serious this is for the Russians, okay? Having the Ukraine in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and there's a whole host of reasons why this is a bad idea for the Russians, and eventually for Western Europe as well. They're living in the now, and they're not looking into the future. But if you continue down this path where you have this NATO Secretary General saying the path of Ukraine and NATO is irreversible, you are eliminating the key foundation of diplomacy. You are doing something that the other side cannot simply accept. So the alternative to détente, a alternative to a political solution, what is that? Well, war. War is an extension of politics by other means. And when you have one side NATO saying, yep, the Ukraine is joining NATO. Absolutely. And the Russians, yeah, that's not going to happen. Red line for us. And I don't think anyone in the Russian Federation, well, I don't want to say anyone, but the large majority of the Russian population would be against that. And again, you have to go back and you have to look at history. You have to look at what is taught in Russian schools. That's important. Obviously, nothing is taught here in Western schools about history. It just doesn't exist. You know, the 58 different genders is more important than what happened during World War II. But in Russia, they actually teach history. And when you take that history and then you say, hey, we're going to put Western European troops, German troops, French troops, what have you, because both of those countries, France, Germany, were either in Moscow or about 20 miles outside of Moscow in major world wars. And you got to go back, obviously, to Napoleon, and you have to go back to the two world wars. But the Russians remember that, and they know that. And they are not going to allow Ukraine to be controlled what is essentially by the Germans and the French and the United States. You know, the United States put troops in Russia, right? Back in World War I. Most people don't even know that. Most people are here in the United States, again, the uninformed urbanite, because they don't teach history. They don't teach history here in the United States, but I'm not going to get too much into that. But what they aren't saying, as we speak today, is the fall of the fortified outpost of Volodar. Volodar has fallen. Kolgift has fallen. Ogledar has fallen. I'm sure this is going to have a name change very shortly. It's not going to be Volodar anymore. Yep. Now, the same thing is happening all across the line of contact. And I think it's going to be a hell of a wake-up for the uninformed urbanites. So think about that here. And the uninformed urbanites here in the United States are thinking about, okay, well, they watch the evening news. They go to bed. Okay, wow, the Ukrainians invaded Russia, right? Well, they took control of a potato field and a town, and the Russians are just bombing the crap out of them. But that's not what's being told. Hey, look, the Ukrainians invaded Russia. They're winning. They're winning. This $200 billion that the American taxpayer has handed over to the Ukrainians. It's working. It's great. It's awesome. Now, you wake up 2 weeks later, and the Ukrainian army is collapsing. There's going to be questions. Because the uninformed urbanite here in the United States is going to bed every night hearing the Ukrainians are winning. The Ukrainians aren't winning. But the uninformed urbanite here in the un-United States believes that. So they're going to wake up the next day, and the Ukrainian army has collapsed. Not only that, you'll probably see revolution taking place in the Ukraine. You'll see military units rebelling, joining Russian forces. It's going to happen. It might not be tomorrow, but that's where this is ultimately taking us. That, look, guys, the Russian people are not stupid. I mean, some of the most fantastic chess players on the planet have been Russians. And the Russians are playing this game 20 moves ahead of what the West is looking at right now. And they know the end game. And the end game is not going to be an irreversible path to NATO. It's just not going to be that. And yes, the Iranians, it sounds like, may launch a strike towards Israel. We we're going to continue to cover that. We don't believe it's going to be a very effective attack by the Iranians if they even do pull the trigger. We'll see what happens. But there's a lot going on there. There's a lot that has happened within the course of the conflict that, and I'm going to say this again, the Israelis have decapitated not just the top of the pyramid, but the entire pyramid. And look, I get it. A lot of persons who watch this channel don't like to hear that, but I'm just telling you what's happening. And right now, let's see what happens. Go back to my videos, what I said, and I stand by that, and let's see what happens. Okay? All right. Well, that's what we have for today. More to come very, very soon. As always, thank you for joining us. Have a good day.